Hey guys, such an interesting video on Wild Rifts. They're back with a Lucian supplementary guide on going for Manamune into crit. So now if we take a look at the Lucian leaderboards, you can see that our top Lucian goes for Manamune into Solari. Here we don't have Manamune. Manamune into Solari, Manamune again, Manamune into Solari. We again have Manamune into Black Cleaver, Manamune into Solari, Manamune into Black Cleaver, Manamune into Solari, and Manamune into Solari. So why are all the top Lucian players building this build? I'm going to explain to you why this Lucian build works, what is the concept of the Lucian build, and whether you should build it or not. Now personally, I do not like this build, although I can see why it is good, because it simply doesn't suit my playstyle. So, the main reason why you're going for Manamune into Solari or Manamune into Black Cleaver is because Manamune gives you 20 ability haste, and Solari gives you 20 ability haste as well. Black Cleaver gives you 20 ability haste also. So basically on 2 items you'll be at 40 ability haste, which is huge. Whereas if you go for the normal build of Stormrazor into IE, you're not getting any ability haste at all. So with the Manamune into Solari, what you're getting is so much ability haste that your dash cooldown is incredibly noticeably shorter. Like, I honestly at first was wondering why this build works, so I playtested it for like about 10 plus matches myself, and I realized of course the main reason why it works is because you get your dash up more often, so you can dash to chase and you can of course dash to run away a lot more often, which is of course amazing. Having more mobility is always good. However, a drawback of this build is you sacrifice a lot of early game damage without having Stormrazor first and building Manamune first. Your early game damage in lane takes a very big hit because you're gonna go longsword into tier, whereas with the Stormrazor you'll be going for BF sword first item, which is a huge injection of AD. And the Stormrazor item itself, when completed, also gives you a huge spike, whereas when you complete Manamune, it really isn't a huge spike at all, because you gotta wait for it to evolve into Mirror Mana. So regardless, Manamune first item, it of course gives you the AD, the mana, and the ability haste. In this case, you mainly get it for the ability haste. In terms of mana, yes, Lucian does run out of mana if you stay on the map for really long, but overall I would say Lucian doesn't really have big mana problems. Like, he does run out of mana on occasion, but I wouldn't say having no mana is a huge deal. Now, as a bonus of this item as well, when you evolve it into the Mirror Mana, you get extra on-hit damage, which of course does amp up your damage quite a bit, because when you trigger your passive with Manamune, with Mirror Mana, I guess I should say, you do get of course the extra on-hit damage on your passive as well as other abilities like your Q, so also contributes significantly to damage. However, issue is that it's not a crit item, so you're gonna have very delayed crit item power spikes. Your second item, you go for Solari Chargeblade. Again, you got the 20% ability haste, 40% attack speed. Attack speed not too important, but still good to get out your passive faster. Of course, you get crit rate, and of course you do also have your Sunburst passive, where every skill cast you do get a stack, and of course you can consume that stack with auto attacks to deal bonus magic damage on hit, which can crit. And of course, combined with the double ability haste items, you can get your abilities up a lot more often, which of course allows you to proc the on-hit of Solari Chargeblade and the on-hit of Manamune a lot more often. And personally, if I want to go for ability haste build, I would go for something like this. Probably gonna make a video on this sooner or later when I test out if this build is good. Like, going from Navori into IE gives you 50% crit and a lot of ability haste as well because of the Navori passive. But I have not tested this build yet. I'm gonna test it soon and probably make a video on it. Boots, defensive boots, and stasis. Then third item, you go for Infinity Edge, more AD, crit, as well as increased crit damage. At this point in time on your third item, you only have 2 crit items, so not the best yet. And then on your second last item, you go for the LDR. Again, another crit item, gives you the ability haste, gives you the attack damage, crit rate, as well as the armor penetration. Lastly, you top it off with a Bloodthirster for 100% crit, more AD, as well as, of course, physical vamp, as well as that extra shield. Now, you can, of course, go for the vamp scepter earlier if you want, because you don't exactly have any kind of lifesteal anywhere in this build except for your hunter vampirism. So one drawback of this build is you don't get to build you don't get to build Serelda's Grudge. Serelda's Grudge combos with your ultimate really well to basically make your ultimate undodgeable, but now you have to go for the LDR to get yourself to 100% crit. And yeah, so that's kind of a drawback of this build. So I really just don't like this build because I feel you don't get enough early game damage. You get your crit power spikes really late, and you don't get to build Serelda's Grudge. So personally, I'm not a fan, but I can definitely see why it's good. I can definitely see why it works, but I just don't like it personally. I think that there are as many drawbacks as there are like pros. So runes and spells, really simple. It's basically the standard Lucian loadout: Kraken, Vampirism, Bone Plating, as well as Hunter Genius. Again, even more ability: Haste, Exhaust, and Flash. So with all that out the way, let's jump straight into the gameplay. Alright, so here we can move on into the gameplay. And honestly, this is pretty much just going to be a very standard like Lucian gameplay. You technically play Lucian almost exactly the same as you normally would when you play this build. The only thing is, of course, as I mentioned in the build section, which is that, of course, you do have lower early game damage. So if you're really used to playing Lucian like with the crit build, like with Stormrazor first item or with IE first item, whatever it may be, you just need to take note that with this build, your damage is very noticeably lower. However, thankfully for me, I'm against a like weird lane of Zeri Nasus. Like, we have a Nasus support here who ends up actually building AP, maxing his E, I assume, followed by his W. So yeah, that's just really weird. But yeah, we end up facing a Zeri and Nasus, and honestly, Nasus' poke in the early game really isn't so bad because he doesn't actually have items yet, and his base like numbers on his E are not too bad. Whereas Zeri, as we know from all of our Zeri videos, she is really weak in the early stages of the game. So because we're facing this particular lane, like Lucian's like weaker early game because of this build is sort of a little bit covered up, which is of course a great thing in this particular match itself. But in other lanes, like let's say you're playing like against Caitlyn or against Draven, or pretty much against any other matchup that's not like a super weak matchup, like not against like a Vayne or Zeri, something like that, you're gonna notice the lack of damage. In fact, even when you're against the Zeri, you're still gonna notice the lack of damage. It's just that you know, you could have maybe had kill potential if you went for a normal crit build, but now you have a little bit less of that kill potential. But again, you spike really hard on 2 items, you spike really hard on 3 items as well. Probably more. Actually, I wouldn't even say more so on 3 items, but 2 items, yeah, I would say more so. Not sure why the directed cam is on. Let me just swap that back into the action real quick. We kind of missed a little bit of a trade there where Zeri popped the barrier. Did get caught by the bubble. We dashed in, attacked her a little bit, comboed her up, and she popped the barrier just for that safety. Nasus also popped the heal, so no flashes blown, but 2 summoners blown, whereas we still have all of ours. Again, it's really positive trait. We're not going to kill them instantly in any way, shape, or form. Even if we had our normal build, we got to blow a little bit of sums first before we can actually get into a situation where we have some kind of kill pressure onto the both of them. So here I'm trying my best not to push the wave too far in so that we can still continue to harass them and possibly even try to zone them away from the minions. Just trying my best here, but of course that's not too easy. Here Zeri W's to the wall, ends up doing only 77 damage to me, doesn't really matter all that much. Here we go in on Nasus because he split from the Zeri and he takes quite a chunk of damage. He's slowly beginning to run out of mana, and here we can see a party is starting to form in the top lane. Aurelia and Lucian are here. We can also see Yasuo coming. Here I'm hard shoving the wave because we're kind of trying to go for a dive, but Yasuo ends up coming to back up his team. Lucian and Aurelia come back so that we can actually get a fight going. Here Lucian ends up kicking Nasus back into tower. Yasuo gets the tornado onto Nami, but I exhaust him, and we do end up getting the kill onto Yasuo with my full combo, even with ulti on as well. Zoe rotates from mid lane, and now an extended fight kind of ensues. Zoe with the Proto Belt W. Aurelia goes in, gets a double stun. I go in, but again, I don't really do very much damage with no items. Here, Aurelia and Lucian goes in, picks up a double kill, and here I back off, but for some reason Zoe decides to walk back towards our team for no good reason. Or rather, I guess she was trying to get the kill onto Irelia, but I was not expecting that from her, so I wasn't even in position to get an assist. I believe I only got the assist off for the other 2 kills. I don't actually think I did any damage to Zoe at all. Anyways, we back complete Manamune as well as boots. And of course, having Manamune, you want to of course begin stacking it. I should be using like W on the way to lane here, but I don't. Mostly because I'm really, even after like 10 matches in, I'm still just not used to having Manamune on Lucian. But probably I'll drop this build after this video because I just don't like this build personally. And don't get me wrong guys, the top players are using this build and I do think this build is good. Here you can see that we still have damage to kill even with this build because Lucian's base numbers are pretty high even without having like, you know, his normal like items. But it's just a playstyle thing where I want to be a lot more aggressive in the early game, so I want more early game damage. And this build may be the best build. I think it could be the best build for Lucian, but it just doesn't suit my playstyle. And at the end of the day, my personal philosophy is that you want to have a build that suits your playstyle. You don't necessarily always want to have, you know, a build that is just good. Basically, and prime examples of that is on like champions who can choose to build more utility or more damage, maybe something like an Ashe. There definitely is a more damagey build like full crit compared to like a more utility build, something like that. And generally you want to play the build that suits your playstyle the best, and in this case this Lucian build just doesn't suit my playstyle. So advise you guys to test out the build yourself, see if you like it, and if you do, go for it. If you don't, like me, then just don't go for it. But at least give it a fair shake like what I've done with these like 10 matches of building this build. Explore the pros and cons of the build and see, you know, what aspects you like about it, what aspects you don't like about it, you know, etc. So here, Irelia, for some reasons, farming the minions instead of following up on Nami's wave and bubble onto Zeri. Here, by the time I get in range to follow up, it's a little bit too late. They've already retreated to under the tower. And yeah, that was just really weird. Irelia goes for the wave instead of going for the kills. But yeah, this Irelia not doing too well. 1, 3, and 4 at the moment. Does have decent KP, but you know, quite a number of deaths at this point. Set is kind of smurfing with being 4, 0, and 1. Lucian also smurfing 5, 0, and 2. And I'm just doing alright 2, 0, and 2. In general, my team is doing pretty well. We already have like a 6k goal lead or so in about 6 minutes, so we're doing really well. Most of our goal lead is of course on Lucian as well as on Set, and our team manages to get both objectives, and that's when you really know that, you know, you're doing really well, because when you secure both objectives, you know, that's kind of just pretty huge. Here we also get, you know, some plates, and here you can see Nasus, he now has his Luden's Echo, and now he is starting to hurt. Like when Nasus gets Luden's Echo, his E is going to start dealing quite a significant amount of damage with the Luden's damage. Here we can see Darius rotating up, so we are trying to play cautiously. I was actually telling Nami to ward that bush there, but Darius ends up standing out of the bush, and we obviously want to back off. We can easily get dived with Nasus and Darius to tank tower. Here I was trying to greet for the wave, which is a really big mistake. Here I get poked out by both of them skills, and here I'm going to have to blow flash to prevent myself from getting hooked, and Nami as well because she has no mana. So a very needless play from me here. And here I try to help out my team because I see them going in, so I'm going to contribute a culling here. And honestly, after this culling, I should have just backed off, but I see a couple of low health bars and I try to go and finish off the kill, but Nasus just escapes and Zeri isn't low enough for me to finish off anyways. So I pretty much just end up dying there. Pretty big mistake from me to firstly just not back off, and secondly to go back in after I'm already chunked out. So just a pretty bad sequence of events for me overall. But the good news is that I am able to pick up the Solari Chargeblade with the gold that I have. So we're on the 2-item Power Spike. Unfortunately, we don't have the Manamune evolve into Mirror Mana yet, but having the 40 ability haste is still pretty huge. Here, we interrupt Darius' recall, and we don't actually need one whole team to kill a Darius. So here I'm just going to pick up the minion wave while my team picks up the kill onto Darius. No real need to like greet for kills. Like in this case, having like 4 people chase after one Darius who's in the enemy jungle doesn't really make sense. Makes more sense for me to just collect the wave and just, you know, move on with the game. Irelia hits a stun onto Zoe, and was attempting to go in there, but nothing really comes of it. Zoe Bubble comes through as well, and again nothing really comes of it. Zeri actually manages to kill Lee Sin somehow. I'm not quite sure how, considering Lee Sin is really fed with double items and Zeri is only at one item. But yes, Lee Sin ends up dying to Zeri, which is of course not what you really want to see. But as of now, it's kind of alright. Our team is still doing really well overall, so shouldn't be too big of an issue altogether. So here, again, nothing too much happening here. So here I'm just farming the raptors, and at the same time in doing so, I'm able to cast more abilities. Because of course you don't want to use Lucian Dash randomly, and you can only cast Lucian Q if there's a target. So in reality, you can only charge Manamune with W unless you have something to attack. Now here I was actually trying to help the set out, but I end up getting hit by the bubble instead, and Set ends up having to tank the Zoe Q for me and ends up almost dying. So in trying to help the Set, I end up nearly killing him. But thankfully, he does survive. He's still 6-0 and 1, still with a huge shutdown. And yeah, he's still doing really well. And really nice of him to, of course, tank the Zoe Q for me. I think even if I got hit by that, I would have not died. I wouldn't have died, but I would definitely have been pretty low. So, regardless, here we're going to go for this red buff, sorry. And at the same time, we can cast a lot of abilities in doing this red buff. Here, Lee Sin is in the area, you can see, and here I'm pinging for him to actually take the red buff so that we can get the buff sharing, which he does indeed do, and I do pick up the spare red buff. Here, a fight looks like it's breaking out in the mid lane river area, and here I spot the Nasus getting hit by Nami Bubble, and I am able to finish her off. I exhaust the Zoe, but I see the Zeri coming in, and I flash out because I actually thought that Zeri had flash out, and if she flash outs on me, I'm pretty sure that flash out plus a little bit of auto attacks from her would have killed me, so I choose to flash out there. But on the replay you can see she doesn't actually have ult, but either way it's better to be safe than sorry, so we don't end up giving a kill to Zeri. Here, Yasuo ends up picking up the Rift Herald. Yasuo is, of course, the enemy jungler, in case you guys didn't notice. And here, instead, we're going to trade for getting the dragon. In this case, having 2 dragons is pretty good. We can have the triple dragon win condition, which is, of course, really strong in terms of giving you a lot of extra stats. Right, so here, pretty much, there's a huge congregation at the top lane from both teams. Nasus gets kicked out of the tower and gets eliminated from the equation by the Set. And in the meanwhile, Nami of all people is pushing in the mid lane. And here, we of course already have red buff, so Set picks up the additional red buff. And my team is kind of split between mid and top, kind of trying to decide where to push. Now this Darius is 1-5-1, has been getting destroyed by the Set, but again, if we get hooked by Darius, we could still possibly be in trouble, so we don't really want to take any chances. Here Set has demolished, and together with our help, we can pretty much take down this tower really quickly. Set gets engaged on by both enemies, and here I'm able to use my ult to get rid of the Darius. And here, unfortunately though, we do end up dying to the Zeri, which kind of is not very optimal, but again, you know, what can you really do about it? And yeah, so here Set ends up slinkering away and taking some fruit. Nami is also running, no mana, has to run for her life. Set ends up TPing back in to try to help Nami, or to maybe go for some kills or something like that. Nothing too much happens though, and Set ends up just going for the wave. Nasus does actually have his Rylai's now, so in addition to dealing that Luden's damage, it's now it's a huge slow feel as well. So Nasus support does have some value with the slow on his E as well as his W, as well as that kind of poke slash burst damage on his E. Not really the worst kind of support in the world, but I would want to have you know, a lot of other supports over him. So here, at long last, not quite sure when it happened, but we finally get our Mirror Mana. Here I actually exhaust the Nasus to try to protect the Irelia. Irelia ends up dying anyway. She's now 2-6-5. Not the best KE in the world, and everyone aside from her is doing really well on our team. We secure the skull. Lee Sin goes into the enemy jungle to get the solo kill onto the Zoe. Now he's getting chased by the Darius, but with the help of Nami, he should be absolutely fine. On our end, we're just going all over the country, just farming whatever we can. Trying to get to our IE, of course, which is going to be our 3-item power spike. Here we don't really have a wave to push top, but Lucian with the Herald play earlier on in the game did already secure the bot inhib, and now we also get the mid inhib. Unfortunately though, Zeri ends up getting the huge massive shutdown onto the set, and here we're actually trying to end the game, but Nasus has the wave clear, and honestly if this was any support that wasn't wave clear, we would have ended the game right here. One of the perks of Nasus, I guess, especially when he's building AP. So here we're gonna dash over the wall and just escape, because Lucian doesn't want to commit to trying to force the end. We could have probably ended there, but the safer play is to just back off and do it the clinical way, which is what we end up doing. Zoe ends up getting stunned, but Lucian kicks her away to safety. Kind of unfortunate there. And here we almost have our IE. We secured that Gromp, and we're now about 100 to 200 gold away from getting IE, which is why we're not recalling, and instead we're heading over to our side of the jungle to pick up these Krugs. And with these Krugs, we will indeed be able to get ourselves the IE. And there we go, we do recall and secure ourselves the IE. So now we're on the 3 item power spike. Pretty huge. And now we're gonna here go over and secure the red buff. We also have 2 inhibitors, 2 inhibitor towers, I guess you could say already, because 1 inhibitor did respawn in the bot lane. And here we spot the Zoe being super duper over aggressive, and she does have to pop the stasis. And this is the clip, of course, that you saw from the intro. We cull down both the Zoe as well as the Zeri, and we're flashing forward to finish off the Zeri. Then we're going to move on to killing the Nasus, exhausting the Yasuo because he does do quite a bit of damage. And here we chase down the Yasuo for the Quadra. Lucian kicks the Darius away, unfortunately. And here we stasis the Darius ulti to survive. And of course, most logical thing to do for a guy who's on a Quadra kill is to chase the pentakill. And here we do indeed manage to reach the Darius, and we do indeed complete the pentakill. And whilst this is happening, my team has managed to push in the mid wave, and we are able to secure the win immediately after. So you guys can see how this Lucian build with a lot of ability haste works, and it is a really good build. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video and learned. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and goodbye.